This has been just such a crazy week with everything going on in the news and all the precautions everybody's taken, canceling basketball tournaments, sporting events. And I thought it would just be a good idea for us all to kind of level set, get together, maybe share a little bit of everything that we're thinking, what we're doing here at Aurora to kind of protect everybody, and maybe just to understand in general kind of the point of everything that's going on in the world around us. And I think where we're at right now, probably the best way to describe it is there's really very low to no risk of most people getting the coronavirus in this country. And we're trying to keep it that way. That's kind of where we're at. It's like we want to keep it at this point of no risk before it gets to where China let it get, where Italy let it get. Our government watched it escalate in these other places. They watched the health systems get overwhelmed. They watched it get to the point where they had to lock 500 million people in their homes in China. And knowing full well that Americans don't want to go through that, they're trying to take some basic precautions now to eliminate how most people would get sick. So think of every time you've got the flu and the reasons that people say, you always come in, you don't think about it, but you're like, got it from the kids. Kids brought it home from school. Schools are closed. That's not going to be a transmission point. Airport, the guy next to me was sneezing like crazy. Yep, don't fly. So they're trying to cut these things down. And the math on infection is kind of crazy too. So it's not just a matter of, if I don't see you, there's one less opportunity to get sick. It's after I see you, I see all kinds of people. So the way that the math works on it is if they can actually just reduce 25% of how much people are interacting, it's a 60% reduction in how much the disease transmits. So it's an exponential effect. So that's why they're going after these big gatherings and saying, please don't have these sporting events. We're playing a game of numbers here. We have 300 million people in the US. So even if you're 99.999% safe, there's people getting it. And I think from a government level and a really high level, they're playing these numbers out and they're understanding a few things about our infrastructure as well. So actually a guy who's a doctor here in Carmel and a family friend, he wrote an article that was in the New York Times. So this is somebody that I know is really smart and respected in his field. And the article that he wrote was about the infrastructure and why some of this stuff is necessary to get ahead of. So, and this is about our country specifically. So in our country, we have 2.8 hospital beds per 1,000 people, which is it's 840,000 beds, something along those lines. So you figure we have less than 1 million beds in the country as a whole. And think about the hospitals. They're usually full already, right? So if they're at 90% capacity, there's only, call it 84,000 open beds on any given day in the US anyway. So if you just think about it, it's 300 million people. There's only 84,000 beds. You start to get our capacity for taking on a surge is relatively light. Within that, only 45,000 of those beds are intensive care. Assume those are 90% full too. That only leaves 4,000 or 5,000 beds available for people who are in intensive care. There's only 160,000 ventilators in the whole country. And this is a respiratory disorder. So they know that if the number of people ill starts to challenge those numbers, where you need 5,000 ICU beds, you have a country of 300 million people, you're trying to keep it below 5,000 people in ICU, you got to get ahead of it, right? That's the whole point. You got to get ahead of it. So this is why I think everybody's being so proactive. And I know personally, my initial reaction to everything was frustration. Why are they closing the school? Nobody's sick. Why are they shutting down these basketball tournaments? Nobody's sick. This is 2 people in the state and I can't get on an airplane. So you go through those emotions of like anger and frustration and why are they changing my way of life? and the reasons are those. The numbers, you can get to a spot where they can't take care of the very few people that get ill. And while most of us are never going to get ill, we're never going to know anybody that gets ill. It's out there and it's happening. You just never know who it's going to be. Think about how silly that one NBA basketball player felt when they asked him about it. He said, what? He's like, nobody has it. He's rubbing microphones and he's touching everything. And he's doing what most of us do. He's like, I'm at no risk. Look at me. I'm 25-year-old world-class athlete. What am I to be scared of? Next day, he's got it. Turns out he gave it to teammates. Like all of a sudden he feels like an idiot. He was one of the 0.0001% of people that's going to get it. But when you play odds like that in 300 million people, somebody is going to get it. So I think just taking a little understanding, not getting frustrated, being a little compliant to it, say, look, we don't want to get to these bad spots. So let's just play along. So here, what can we do? We're fortunate. We're a relatively small group. We're not an employer like Eli Lilly with 100,000 employees. Think about their math again. Think about Walmart's math. Walmart has over 1 million employees. They know somebody's going to get it. When they pull people to work in certain locations, they might have 50,000 people in a location. Somebody's going to get it. It's going to transmit it. Might rip them apart. They're going with these things of groups of like no more than 250 because statistically, you stay in smaller groups, you're safer. So now we're getting the benefit of being in a smaller company. We rarely ever have more than 100 people in this building at the same time, which is relatively low risk. We all live in a relatively rural area where people aren't over interacting. We go to grocery stores, we go for a walk. We're not shoulder to shoulder with other people. We're probably lower risk than the rest of the world, but we can still do our part and take our precautions, wipe down surfaces, wash our hands, try to limit our travel, try to limit gas. Like I said, just a 25% reduction for everybody in social interactions reduces threats by 60%. So that's why all this is going on. So try, to get, first of all, don't let the emotions of fear and frustration manifest itself into fear. Because I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. What we're doing all of this for is to prevent getting to a stage of hysteria where now you're like, now if I get sick, I can't get care. The fact of the matter is if you do get sick, you can get care right now. And we're doing all of these things to make sure that that's always the case so that there's nothing to be scared of. So while it's frustrating, there's really no reason for fear. In the event that things do get worse, I think Aurora is in kind of an interesting spot. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking to other business leaders. And we were at FedEx and we were talking about them the other day. And, we're the Aurora network. I'm not just talking about our employees, but our customers, our fleets, everybody. Our network probably is relied on for 25 to 30% of the trailers in the United States. And if you think about how water, medical supplies, blood, food, the necessities of life move from one point to another, fuel to keep it going, it's all on trucking. And with the number of miles that those trucks run, they have to be able to keep working on them and maintaining them. They have to be able to go to gas stations. They have to be able to operate safely. So there's going to be certain industries like entertainment where the NBA can just shut down and there's no impact. Nobody needs the NBA for anything. Maybe movie theaters start shutting down. There's no reason to get a couple hundred people in the same spot if it's just for recreation. Go home and watch Netflix. But there's certain things that are going to have to continue. Healthcare workers are going to have to go to hospitals. And truck drivers are going to have to truck product. It just is what it is. And because of that, their mechanics are going to have to come and they're going to have to keep stuff rolling. So I think that the country is dependent on us doing what we do kind of throughout it, especially if it becomes somewhat prolonged. So we're doing what we can do to make sure that we've got plans in place too, that if we need to continue working and it is a level where people are scared or where risk is high, that we can have people that can work from home, the people that have to come here, that we have the right amount of personal protective equipment as far as masks and those sort of things, which is not an easy task to pull off, that we have the right procedures in place so that people are allowed to wear respirators at work. There's whole OSHA requirements and other things there. So I don't think that we're going to let everything get to that point, but we're working way, way, way ahead. And I just want everybody to understand that we're putting a lot of thought into it. We're really trying to stay way ahead of this. We don't want to be in a reactionary spot. And the other thing that I want everybody to understand is these disruptions in lifestyle affect everyone individually in a different way. So there's people that aren't here today because they have to figure out what they're going to do with their kids while the schools are closed. And there's people who are going to get sick that maybe are going to call out a little more frequently than they would have in the past. And we're going to have to, either allow them to work remotely or figure out how to backfill them. And people that get really sick, might be out longer than they typically have sick pay available. And we want to be able to work with them too. We don't want anybody to get hurt financially. We don't want anybody to have a situation where they can't take care of their families. But because it's so individual, we can't just blanket say, here's our policy for everybody. Everybody can have unlimited vacation time. Everybody can have unlimited sick pay. We can't be is broad with that. So what we can be is we can be discretionary, and we can understand everybody's individual circumstance, and we can work with them to come out with something. We don't have 100,000 employees. We have less than 300. So the people that have life strains, we have the bandwidth to talk to them. So if you have challenges, you have things you're worried about, you have concerns, or you have a reason why you don't think you should call out sick even though you are sick, please talk to Sherry, please talk to your manager, please talk to somebody, because we really want to work with everybody, especially through this in this time where you're trying to limit the number of interactions people have with other people that are sick. And even though just regular flu is kind of going along, it's just a good time to practice being safe, because we're not, the one spot where the country is not in a good place is in testing. They're just not broadly testing people to see who has it and who doesn't. So they can't really focus on quarantining people until they can broadly test. So meanwhile, it's just everybody has to treat everything as a worst case scenario. Don't just assume that your flu is a normal flu and that it's not going to affect anyone. Every sickness that could potentially bring somebody to a hospital or to a healthcare puts more pressure on the system. And this is all about taking pressure off of the system. So that's really all that I wanted to cover everybody today, is just kind of let them know a little bit how we're thinking about it, let them know what's going on. Again, I know it's disruptive. I know it's upsetting what's going on in the world. I really don't think at this point it's anything to be fearful of. I just think we all do our part. It's one of those things where, you know, this is probably like an older concept, but as Americans and going back into wartime, people make small sacrifices that overall are for the greater good. And that's kind of where we're at in this. And if everybody can kind of figure out how to make small sacrifices in their lives, washing their hands more, washing their surfaces, being careful, calling out when they're sick. If everybody does that, it goes a long way in limiting those interactions and helping this thing maybe get squashed before it really gets off the ground. And if it does ramp up, just again, rest assured that we have plans for everybody to be able to continue working or getting paychecks, or we're going to figure out how to make this go. The good news is this is a really, 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 really good company. We just had our best sales night last night that we've had in months. In the middle of this, NHL, NBA, everybody's canceling. Hotels are going out of business. Airlines are saying they're going to lose $110 billion. We had our best sales night. We were having a promo. Our customers are blowing the doors off because they know trucks are still going to roll. It just is. That's the whole reason I came to this industry. I used to work in construction. I've seen it go from everything to zero. I don't like working in that kind of environment. We're in one of those stable backbone industries where we're going to keep going. So don't be fearful for anything to do with continuity at work. Don't be fearful about anything to do with your paycheck. This company is going to be selling all the way through. And even if you're sick or you can't come to work, we'll be able to take care of those that have a hard time. So that's our commitment to you guys. And all that we're asking is that take those extra precautions, wipe down surfaces, kind of comply with some of these extra steps. That's hopefully only for the next month or two, but however long it goes on, you know, we'll be doing our best to make sure that it doesn't affect us and our network. So before we end, does anybody have any questions? And we've got everybody here. I'm sure that everybody's concerned. Is there anything anybody's worried about, concerned about, would like to know about? Okay. Well, we won't keep everybody in one group very long, but anyway, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.